Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now, to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. Some of our previous guests have been Mike Bosch of Atento Capital, Chip Gabarino, who's got a ton of interesting restaurants, bar concepts in town. We actually had Lee Easton on of Aerovision recently. Check out those podcasts. Today, however, Chad Franson of Rise 25 is my co-host, and we're flipping it on its head. Chad has done hundreds of interviews with successful entrepreneurs, investors, and CEOs. And today he's going to be interviewing me. Chad, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, Matt. I look forward to talking to you. Before we get going here, I will let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by Key Renter Property Management. Key Renter Property Management is a full-service property management company helping their clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. They help their clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. No matter what rental you have, single-family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, Key Renter Property Management has the management solutions you need. Go to keyrenterpmc.com or email them at info@keyrenterpmc.com. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for allowing me to join you today. Why don't we talk about the onboarding process that you guys might have for a new client that has come to work with you? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for being here with us, Chad. The new client onboarding process is a step-by-step process, fairly robust. It's been developed over a number of years from the perspective of having had gaps in the process that we've just closed and then identified and provided the solution for up front. So what happens is you'll talk to one of our awesome BDMs, our business development managers, who handle the sales of our property management services. Once you agree that you like the services, you've had all your questions answered, you'll get a contract, a property management agreement. That property management agreement gets signed, and that kind of kicks off the entirety of the process. From that point forward, our team puts it into the system, into our software, which is AppFolio. And then you will get, as an owner, you'll get a notification saying that you can open up your portal. And that portal allows you to go in and check a bunch of things, but it also allows you to put in the $300 property reserve, which we always describe as your money as an owner, but money that we hold for incidentals, or things that happen at the property that we need to pay for. We always have a little bit of cash on hand so that we can pay things, because the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission doesn't like us paying for your property renovation or work with another owner's money. So once that money's in, we'll kind of get started putting together all of the work orders necessary to get the property up and running. That list of work orders will most certainly include a property inspection, where one of our maintenance technicians will go out and do an inspection of the property. But it also could include carpet cleaning, painting, other things that need to get done for the property to be made rent ready. And we're happy to do as much or as little of the work as an owner wants us to do. So we can go in and, run new electrical lines, all new plumbing. We can do a full renovation, as we've discussed in other episodes, but we also can just do, a basic make ready cleaning, so that when a new resident moves into a property's in great shape. From that point, we'll get the property, rent ready, and then we will hang a lockbox, and then get the property photographed professionally. We'll publish those photos across multiple platforms, the most important of which is Zillow and the Zillow Rental Network. We will market the property on the internet across, again, multiple platforms, and then we'll show the property. We'll conduct the showings until a resident likes the property and submits an application. From the point of application, we kind of get into the full leasing cycle. And I'll stop there for just a moment. We can touch base on leasing in just a second.
Sure. You talked about the maintenance inspection. As we talked about in one of your previous episodes, you guys you could do management for one unit and also entire complexes. What goes into that maintenance inspection, and is it different depending on whether it's one unit or an entire complex?
Yeah. So it definitely goes. It's definitely different whether it's one unit or one complex. The maintenance inspection was born out of pain that we felt moving residents into property. So there was a time when we moved a resident into a property and we hadn't done a full inspection because we were a smaller team. We had fewer units under management, and we didn't have the resources to do an inspection. So I had seen the property, but I didn't notice that in the garage there was a car. So the tenants moved in and were like, yo, there's a Lexus in the garage. And I was like, oh man, the owner must have left a vehicle. That's really annoying. I'm sorry. I better figure out how to get that vehicle out of the garage. There was another instance where a resident moved into a property. It was the middle of winter and they were unable to get gas turned on because the gas lines weren't working. And then they went, 2 weeks without having gas. We had to provide space heaters and it's just a total nightmare. So what we started doing is have maintenance inspectors doing a maintenance inspection for move out. The work gets done, then they do it for move in. And then, you've got an image of what the property looked like at move out. You've got an image of what the property looked like at move in after the work was completed so that at the next cycle what you can hold a tenant accountable for and what might have been normal wear and tear or previous damage. So what happens is the maintenance technician will go in, he'll spend probably an hour doing everything like identifying all sorts of physical marks, deferred maintenance. He'll also plug in to make sure that electrical sockets are working and are grounded. He'll check gas burners. He'll check the AC, the heating units. I mean, he does basically a home inspection, but he's not a licensed home inspector. So he might not catch everything that a home inspector might catch, but he's going to catch everything or 95% of the things that could go wrong with house. He's going to check P-traps and make sure that there's no leaking sinks and make sure that fixtures and faucets are all solidly placed. He's going to check for nicks and scratches on countertops. He's going to check for windows that are broken and screens that are broken. And fundamentally, he goes through an AppFolio. He goes through our software, takes a ton of photos, right? I mean, sometimes these are 25 or 30 megabyte files if you're actually going to download them and send them to somebody. But which is why actually we put them into the portal so that an owner can see them and download them directly instead of trying to send them via email because they're too big to send via email. But he'll check everything. And he also will make sure that the minimum property standards that are part of our management contract, that an owner will sign an agreement that they agree that these things need to happen before it can get rented. We can't have cracked windows. We can't have cracked window screens or broken window screens. We can't have cracked, electrical outlet covers, et cetera. The maintenance tech will make sure that all those things are compliant, and he'll make a list of things that aren't, so that we can send our rather than an inspector out to do it, we can spend the maintenance tech to actually, do the work and make it rent ready.
Has a client ever been surprised as to the quality that their unit is in, or the
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, oftentimes we have out-of-state clients that haven't seen their property in multiple years, or if ever. I mean, we have plenty of clients that have never seen the property. They're buying them sight unseen as investment properties. And so certainly we have people that are shocked by the condition of the property. It's also not hard to shock somebody fundamentally when the carpet looks bad, because a carpet can be cleaned, it can come back, it can be resurrected. But if the carpet just has a lot of pet hair or something, it just looks a little bit dirty. It gives the appearance of being far worse than it might actually be, right? It might just be a $300-400 carpet cleaning, and then the carpet is resurrected and looks great again. But an owner sees a carpet that looks bad, or, think about anything at your house. You're in the kitchen, you open up a pomegranate, a little bit of red juice squirts on the white wall, and it's, you might clean it off, you might not clean it off, you might not see it, and it's there for a little bit. It makes it look very bad, but with a quick wipe of a napkin, it's much better. So oftentimes people, owners are surprised, but then a deep clean makes all the difference in the world.
And then you give them options as to how to rectify the situation.
Correct. So we generally would put together a list of the items that were identified by the inspector, which is part of the maintenance team. And then we'd say, look, here's a bid to bring it up to the minimum property standards. And if you want to go, if you want to have the HVAC checked out, that's also a good idea. If you want to have the filters changed, filter change is a bad example because that's a necessity. But if you want to make sure that there's insulation in the ceiling, you can also, we can also utilize the following companies to blow in insulation, and, tenants will be cooler, their bills will be lower, they're likely to stay longer, it improves the condition of the property, et cetera, et cetera.
You talked about the marketing of the property then, and Zillow is the only one that matters. Why is that?
I mean, I think what we find when we run the statistics, and it hasn't been done in a little while, it's been consistent whenever we did it in the past, but in essence, Zillow is responsible for probably 80% of the leases that we sign. So for the qualified applicants that come through the system, it's responsible for the vast majority of the qualified people that we put into properties. There are other places. Show Me the Rent, Show Mojo. Maybe that's a software. Sorry, Show Me the Rent. There's Abode, and a bunch of other websites that are great. I mean, they look great, but they just are not responsible for nearly as many qualified tenants as Zillow. I think Zillow is just the market leader in terms of what we see.
You kind of alluded to your leasing process. Let's kind of get into that. You start out by vetting the potential renter, and then you move forward from there.
Yeah. So in essence, after an applicant likes the property, they submit an application, and we'll wait till we get the application before we take any further steps. So we'll sometimes that comes in a pair. It's some roommates, husband and wife, whatever it would be, and then we will run the credit application as the very first step. So we'll see what their credit is immediately. If they have a 750 credit score, it's very unlikely that they're going to have many issues. They're not going to be lying to us on the application about their previous landlord. They're not going to be lying to us about the previous or current job situation. But you also know fundamentally that a 750 credit score is less likely to be there in 2 years than somebody who has a 650 credit score. 650 is working on their credit perhaps, and they can do that through our system. We utilize a software called CredHub that actually reports their positive and negative rent payments, so they can actually build something for the future and actually buy a house at some point. But a 650 might be in the house for 2 or 3 years as they're building up credit, saving a down payment. A 750 or an 800 credit score is probably going to be there a year while they're building another house or while they're in the interim trying to buy something. So it's a mixed bag getting 800. That they're going to keep the property in pristine condition, but they probably won't be there that long. Anyways, we check the credit score. We cross-reference their social security number and the addresses that pop up according to Equifax with the address that they listed as their previous and current residence. And then we check name, date of birth, and a bunch of other stuff. But from there, we go into their job history and we contact their previous employers, current or previous employers, to the extent they give it to us. We make sure that they're going to continue to be employed, that they were good employers. If they smoke, we ask the employer if they smoke, if they have any bad habits, if they've been good employees, a bunch of things like that. Then we reach out to the current or former landlord or landlords as we have the data and ask the same thing. Do they have any pets? Do if they smoke? Do they have any lease violations? Were the police ever called? Were there any other incidents? Would you rent to them again? What was their rent? How many times were they late paying rent, et cetera, so that we get a full picture or a fuller picture of how they were as a resident of a previous property and whether we'd want to continue or whether we want to rent to them in general. We also check the sexual predator watch list. We check the terrorist watch list, and we check for criminal history. There's some things, that we see with relative frequency. People have DUIs. People were caught 10 years ago, petty crimes, stealing things from a grocery store or Target or something. We can't see the exact location, obviously, but we can see that they stole small stuff. Any felony in the last 7 years that's against person or property will automatically disqualify. And then at that point, we make a decision as to whether we want to rent to the potential resident or not.
So if somebody has a 750 credit score and somebody has a 650 credit score, and it's like there's one unit available, you would potentially lean toward the 650 depending on all the other factors.
So if it were my property, and we own a lot of property, so I feel this very viscerally, I would always take the 650, given that they have positive employment references and positive previous residential history references, right? I mean, that's a really important caveat. That the 700 is going to be a great resident. You most of the time know that they're also going to leave very quickly. I'd rather have lower vacancy periods and make sure that the person has at least a non-zero chance of staying for 3 or 4 years. Right? I think realistically, it's much more likely that somebody with a higher credit score is going to leave.
In terms of the time for the lease, is that something that you work with the client to determine, or do you guys have set times? Like so 1 year, 6 months, whatever. Yeah.
So Lisa and the rest of our sales team in different markets will always tell the owner the same thing. The minimum that we do is 12 months. Unless we've been handed a property in winter, in which case we don't want a 12-month lease that puts us back in winter, which is the off-peak leasing season. The likelihood that you get maximum rent in a bidding war among multiple tenants to get the property that allows you to raise the rent a little bit beyond where you marketed it is optimized if you're in summer peak leasing season, which is, call it April/May into the end of August, right? Because August people start tapering off as their kids go to school, et cetera. In winter, you just have fewer options in terms of tenants that are likely to come into the property. So I don't want to lease the property again in winter, which means if I have a December property that we pull on, I'm going to try my hardest to get an 18-month lease, which will put us 2 summers from now. And if that's just an impossibility and I have no other options, I might put a 6-month lease on something. That allows me then to go, because we're in winter and we're leasing in winter, we're probably going to have to reduce the rent a little bit. And it allows me to then get 6 months of reduced rent and then go to the same people and say to them, hey, if you want to continue for another 12 months, you're going to have to pay market rent, maybe market rent plus. And their options now, as they look around in the middle of summer, are going to be other properties that are priced at market rent or market rent plus. And they understand that every property they apply for, if they want to move and they want to bear the expense of, a moving truck and having, buying their friend's pizza to help pack up some stuff and tape and boxes and everything else is now added to the idea that they're going to pay a lot more in rent wherever they go.
And you have stipulations in place for those who, maybe agree to a long lease and then something comes up and they have to move and break the lease.
Absolutely. So we've got a lease break fee in our lease. It generally says that there's a 2-month notice period and a 2-month violation fee. So during that period, we'll negotiate that. I mean, if somebody says, "Hey, I've got to leave early, but it's the middle of summer and it's early, it's March, April," if they give us notice and then are willing to show the property and help us, keep the property in really good shape and tell people that we're a great landlord and help them, make the jump to the next tenant, we're happy to kind of work with them on the lease violation fee. Fundamentally, that fee is meant to prevent a tenant from moving out in December and then having the property sit vacant from December to February because nobody leases properties between December and February, right? I mean, from Thanksgiving, maybe a tiny bit of activity in the middle of December, but then through New Year's and New Year's resolutions, Christmas time, like people aren't leasing properties. Their desire is not to move in the middle of winter. So we want to be able to protect the owner against that downside possibility.
Hey, in terms of the onboarding process, are there some frequently asked questions you get as clients come on board?
Definitely. We have a number of questions. I mean, I think one of the primary questions is what needs to be done to my house before it's rent ready. And I think that's generally answered in the minimum property standard. So again, I'll repeat them here, but we can't have cracked screens, broken windows. We can't have cracked window covers. I think there are some things that, a fresh paint job can help really, improve the leasability of a house and get top dollar rent. Although I will say, it's not a science. It's more of an art. You can paint a room, but you don't know if that room is going to get you an extra $15 on the rent or $30 on the rent. But that when people walk into the house, they're going to feel the lack of fresh paint. So, it's not a direct correlate. It's just, you have a sense that if the nicer you make the house, the more you're going to get in rent, but it's really hard to tell. People often ask about, how we screen tenants, and we, explain to them that it's about credit score, which to me personally is the number one factor that I think is important, because people that can maintain their credit score and understand that they must pay for liabilities for debt that they take out. I mean, that's a critical component of life, and it's a critical component of making sure that tenants are going to pay their rent, because this is a debt that they've taken out. It's a contract that they've signed. So people want to understand the fundamentals of how we do it. And it's a 16-point check, as I kind of described earlier. People also want to know, what else do people want to know? They want to know about security deposits, how they're handled. They want to know about pets and whether we allow them. And I would say for the vast majority, I mean, there are statistics out there nationally that you can check, but in excess of 50% of residents of rental properties have pets. And so if you don't want pets in your property, we can certainly lease properties without pets, but it makes it much more difficult. It negates our lease guarantee. We have a 2-week lease guarantee that ensures that we have a lease signed within 2 weeks, or the first month of management is free. So it negates that. And it also just makes it just generally much more difficult to place a resident. I will say, generally we get pet rent, which helps offset, some of the potential damage or extra cleaning or other things that can come about from pets. We also take extra security deposits. So we're generally covered on the back end with pets, and it has not been a huge issue traditionally, but there are many people that just have it in their heads that they don't want pets. The other thing is if a resident comes to us and has an authorized emergency service animal letter, there's very little that we can do to fight them on that, right? So they don't have to tell us. It's not a pet. Technically, it's a service animal. So they don't have to tell us about it. And then they can show up at the property with after we approve them with no pet, they can give us an emergency service animal. And that can be a difficult road to navigate. And owners that really don't want pets don't like that. There's very, very little we can do without facing the repercussions of a lawsuit from HUD.
Hey, final question for you. Is there anything that clients are often maybe tend to be skeptical about as they start to do business with you?
Yeah, I think clients are skeptical of the idea that we'll manage their property in a way that really reduces the headache for them. So I definitely think that it's an arbitrage play, right? We're not going to do it as the owner will do it. I mean, we'll do it to the best of our ability. We'll do it as if we were the owners, but the owner has in an instant, they can make a decision about whether they want to replace the HVAC system for $6,000. They understand their own financial situation. They understand, they have a feeling on inflation. They've got an understanding of what an HVAC system cost them at their own home 2 years ago, and when they got a new bid yesterday. So they understand the fundamentals of pricing in a way that we just cannot understand on their behalf. I can tell them it's good pricing. I can tell them we have 3 bids, and the pricing ranges from $5,200 to $5,600. But they can make a snap second decision about whether it's worth it to them in that moment. They also have understanding of their goals, whether they want more depreciation and they can spend money this year because they have offsetting gains or not, right? Or whether the HVAC was replaced 3 years ago and before we were managing it. So there's a bunch of stuff that they fundamentally have consideration and understanding of that we won't. But I can say that we'll manage it to the best of our ability as if we own it, because we do own rental properties. Many people on our team own their own homes and their own rental properties. And so we understand the pain of making some of those decisions. But I also say, the amount of headache that we take away in every step of the process. I mean, just think about what happens when you have to order a photographer to come take photos, or you're doing it with your iPhone yourself when you're doing the leasing process. That for us is a routine part of the leasing process. But for an owner, they have to find a highly reputed, well-reputed photographer. They've got to organize it, schedule it, let them in. They also have to cut a check at some point. I mean, cutting a check, even if it's 35 seconds, then you put it into your checkbook, and then you have to balance it at the end of the month. Ends up being 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how you do it. And every single step, then uploading the photos from getting them Dropbox, signing into Dropbox, putting them onto Zillow, dealing with all the residents that come through. Every step of the process takes time, and you can there might be 150 processes or steps of the process that takes, each between 50 and 300 seconds. We can do all that in a relatively limited period of time. And so it's an arbitrage game. You take a small fee in exchange for the time that it takes you to do it as an owner. And we do that really, really well. So I think people are skeptical of what how much time we can actually save them, and it can be tremendous.
And I'm guessing a lot of the clients they're not even anticipating a lot of those steps, let alone skeptical about them.
Right. So we definitely get a lot of clients that have done it themselves and are tired of doing it themselves. So they say, hey, I did my first 5, but at this point I can't scale beyond 5 because I'm always talking to tenants. I'm always talking to vendors. I'm always paying vendors. I'm always scheduling them. I'm always coordinating between tenants and vendors. And I'm always taking new photos or doing whatever. And they say, look, I like the process of buying property. I like depreciation. I like interest expense. I like all these things, but I certainly don't like, all the headache associated with the management of it. And so, I want to pass that part off so I can continue doing what I'm best at, which is the acquisition, financing, and doing it over and over again.
Hey, Matt, it's been great to talk to you. Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.